Fear and laziness are really the two things there. I mean, the thing I hate most in a cover is a cliche of any kind. That the writers that write for us wrote their own books. And the real important thing is determining from where I'm sitting why they wrote this book instead of a different book. And everyone deserves to, the sort of, a cover that comes from this place of sort of,
But I mean,
how much do writers interact with designers? How much say do they?
Yeah.
How much? Oh, yeah. How much?
Right. So it really depends. Like I said, I've been doing this 12 years actually. At the beginning of my career, I had no interaction with the authors whatsoever. It was, I would show stuff to editors and to marketing committees, and then eventually would filter to the author, and everyone would somehow then decide if it worked or not, and then they'd tell me, and I'd have to go back to well or not. So that's a terrible process, a totally broken process. Now, more than ever, I work really directly with the authors, which is great. In fact, I just did a cover for, Ben Marcus did a story collection where I just decided that I wanted to commission him to write something for the front. Because I just felt like there needed to be some immediacy to the cover. I just love this feeling that when you pick up a book, that something begins, that the book begins almost instantly, that you're ineluctably drawn to it, but also that whatever the affect and the sort of the thrust that the narrative contains, that it begin instantly. That there isn't this sort of transitional phase. And he wrote something beautiful about what a short story is, and sort of it worked great. So now I'm finding now more than ever that I have access, and I really love it. I wanted to then is it okay if I just bounce a question back? So this thing about image and text, right? I was really interested in how you guys were working, and there is this sort of popular notion that image illustrates text. But of course that's not really, it can work that way. Image can annotate text. Image can ignore, be dissonant with text. There are all of these relationships that text and image can have. And it sort of reminds me, my wife who's there as a dancer, and we see a lot of dance, it reminds me of the sort of the composer-choreographer relationship in a way, that there are moments where the dance can sort of deviate. And I'm wondering if you guys ever made a decision in your process making books to have the image be dissonant or deviate in some way from the text, or did it always have to be sort of in step or consonant?
I mean, for me, I think there are definitely moments where there's a kind of crescendo in the book, and the image actually then it almost shatters and falls apart at a certain point. So there's this intentional place where it kind of coalesces, comes together, creates these double-page spreads, and then breaks up into two images again, and then completely, where the marks kind of collapse, the image itself breaks down, and that's part of that collision. And I think working within there is part of like the collision, this kind of chance collision of image and text too. What can happen with that dissonance?
That's really fascinating. I love that. That idea of an accident.
Yeah.
I was thinking back to when we published James Joyce's Ulysses with a lot of etchings by Robert Motherwell. This was a long process. It took 4 years of negotiation, and finally he came through. I said, "Now, Robert, Joyce has meant so much to you. He's your favorite author, and you borrowed phrases and sentences and so on for titles for your paintings and drawings and so on from him. You owe it to Joyce to do this book." Oh, we had this to do and that to do, but he finally came through with many images and just sent them to us. And these are abstract images. Now, how are we going to put them into the book? I called a friend from Southern California who was a literary scholar, but who knew quite a bit about Joyce. And I said, "I'll pay your airfare. Come on up out. We've got to spend a weekend on this thing." And laid out all the images on the floor of our library. And we took, I think this was his idea, maybe I had a little something to do with it, but we took Joyce's schema, which was a sort of outline that Joyce prepared for early readers of the manuscript. That was supposed to help them see that there were some parallels and things that that didn't come out of the cultural classical past. And so we laid out all of these categories that Joyce had set up and decided that we would pluck the titles from those and put them in the episodes. They were not chapters, the 18 episodes. And it all just snapped into place. And later I was showing the images in the order and with the titles to Robert Motherwell for his approval. And he said, "You think that looks like a bed?"
This is a wonderful way to sum up, because you actually are talking about this orchestration, which is what's so exciting, I think, about a book. It's not just the typography, it's not just the writing, it's not just the physical, the aesthetics, the literary, the artistic ability, aspect of that object, but the fact that it can be read in so many different ways. So unless somebody has a really pressing last question, I think we have reached the end of... Oh, okay.
Could anybody say something about the difference between collaboration and working in your own little... You all do massive collaboration with a writer, with hand objects, commercial objects. You work with so many different sets of skills, YouTube, plus the business part. And how do you do it? We have a lot of authors here, and then we have a lot of artists here. How do you manage?
Well, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you have to say, this is my thing and I'm doing it this way, right? I mean, you have to draw a line sometimes. And then sometimes you're working on something with someone, it's a simpatico relationship. You feel that sometimes great things come out of hard arguments. I mean, I would say, for me at least, it depends on the circumstances.
Is that true for you? There's more collaboration than when you do
Working-
your own painting?
Yeah, when I'm working with a printmaker, the printmaker has, or with Andrew in this case, the printmaker has an incredible experience and knowledge of how to work with this material. And I'm coming with a form of working in the language, and then an experience with working in copper, working with certain techniques that I have. But usually, before starting a project, I like to go wherever I'm going to go, and usually start in a way we try and find some place, some common ground, maybe drink a lot or go to the beach or something where there's some place to begin with that you can kind of get into some kind of groove with each other, and then somehow there's the way that I've worked with printmakers is that I have an image and I'm working with that, and then they bring so much knowledge to that most of the decisions and shifts that have taken place in my painting come from the collaborative process of having worked with amazing printmakers, who then suggest mixing certain colors into the ink that I would never have thought of that change the tone of the paper, tone of the color. And the same thing happened with Andrew, this technique of working with these very fine pens on this mylar to create this. What was the type of plate we used?
Polymer.
Yeah, these polymer plates, which I had never worked with. And I insisted on a different form to interact with them, and was certain it would be very similar. He insisted it wouldn't. He was right. So these types of these types of lessons are incredibly enriching for the process of making, I think. So for me, it's always been a really incredible. Yeah, it's been fantastic.
It's terribly important that even though we are all having to be collaborative, that one sticks by one's guns and sees the project through in a way that you can be proud of. And I have fairly strong aesthetic opinions. But at the same time, I have a group of 12 people I'm working with and on a daily basis, and then there are all these other personalities coming in with authors, people who write introductions, and the very accomplished contemporary artists who are involved. It doesn't always work, but it's rare that it doesn't. I mean, first of all, we try to find an artist who can read and does read. Yeah, I would say the books succeed through this interaction and the allowance for people to come forward if they can make it quick with good ideas.
I think that's a good way to sum it up. I mean, it's true, I'm sure, for all of us that a lot of our best ideas are born out of confrontations, either with a paper or, some other part of the collaborative process. But what you have shown good examples of is very unique visions that have an integrity. And I think the one thing that we all have in common is trying to make the individual expression visible in this day and age. Yes, we deluge with thousands of pictures, but many of those pictures are made by committees and in a way represent a kind of middle ground. But what you see in a book and what you see here is very individual point of views that are represented by the hand of the person making it. And I think as readers and as viewers, we all recognize that and really value it. So, thank you.
Thank you, guys.